So I'm Sara Cofflin, and Anna and I met a couple weeks ago, and she thought that maybe I could come and talk to you guys a little bit about payroll fundamentals and everything you might need to know, and probably more than you need to know about payroll for your business. So a little bit of background about me. I work for ADP. I'm a small business consultant. So I work with small businesses just as yours, day in and day out. And I really enjoy doing it. I specialize in payroll, of course, but also HCM, so human resources and benefits as well. So I put together little slides. Hopefully it's all really helpful, but I just want you guys to know if there's any questions or you guys have anything to add, feel free to hop off mute and just jump in. I just want to make sure this is super informative for you guys. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started here. I wanted to kick us off with some payroll myths because these are three of the most frequent things I hear from small business owners that I think that maybe we could just overcome today and talk about a little bit. So the first one is, I'm the only employee, I don't need a payroll service. So I hear this one pretty frequently, but I just like to tell small business owners that you're required to file the same forms, the same taxes, and have the same reports that a large corporation like Amazon or Walmart would be required to file. So there's a lot of admin tasks associated with payroll, and payroll services such as ADP, our goal is to take off those hats because we know that as small business owners, you guys are wearing hundreds, if not thousands of different hats at one time. So we really help to automate the process of payroll, and we take tax liability, which means any taxes that we pay on behalf of your business are covered by us, so that if the IRS comes in and audits you guys, we cover that audit and we pay any, charges that may come up. So that's something I like to point out. Even with one employee, there's still multiple forms, there's quarterly taxes, things like that you'll want to be on top of. And it can take a lot of time out of your day just to make sure, everything is going and running compliantly. The next one here is, I can pay all of my workers as 1099s, and so I can write them all checks. Anna and I talked about this a lot, about worker classification, and it's something that I don't think personally is talked about enough, especially with small businesses. And while you may have all 1099s, you're still responsible for their 1099 forms at the end of the year, just like you would get your W-2 form at the end of the year to use for your personal taxes. And so you have to take meticulous records to make sure that that's accurate information that you're reporting, A, to the employee, and also B, to the federal government. So that's really important. But also the Department of Labor has big fines, especially recently, that they're associating with misclassification of workers if they do an audit. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes here, but just wanted to mention that as well. And then the last one here is, it's cheaper to do payroll in-house. And while that can be true, I will say the average salary of a payroll specialist is about $47,000. So that's more than your average payroll service will cost. In fact, I've never seen a payroll that costs that much annually. And you're also, liable, your business is liable for any tax errors that may come up with that, and can lead to back taxes, fines, and business shutdowns, unfortunately. So it's something definitely to keep in mind. I highly recommend payroll services or even working with a CPA over doing an in-house payroll. So I wanted to first talk about tax IDs today because, it's kind of in the process. I'm sure that you guys are already aware of EINs, but tax IDs, we're going to take just a bit of a deep dive because it's not talked about enough, and there's not enough education for small business owners out there, to understand what you need to start your business. So I'm sure you guys know your EIN. It's your federal tax ID number, and it identifies your business for tax purposes. Payroll taxes are very similar to that in that you will receive payroll tax IDs, very similar to your EIN, except for they're typically state-specific or locale-specific. So you can run into multiple kinds of payroll tax IDs. State tax IDs are account numbers that the business obtains depending on where their business is located and where their employees work. You can have multiple tax IDs, both state and local. Unlike your EIN, where you only have one, basically it's your business's social security. And for payroll purposes, there's two main tax IDs that you will want to be aware of. And that is the SIT and the SUI, which we're going to talk about right here. And there's a lot of confusion around these taxes, so please let me know if you have questions or if you want to talk separately about it. This is a majority of what I do all day is make sure that businesses are set up compliantly and have these tax IDs. The SIT tax ID is also your state income tax, and it is where your employees live. So a business can have multiple SIT tax IDs, and in the region that we're in, we typically see businesses with multiple tax IDs because they have employees in Maryland, Virginia, and DC. So you might have multiple SIT tax IDs. You can also have local SIT tax IDs as well. And as I said, it depends on where your employees live. Some local governments will require a local SIT tax ID. Maryland, DC, and Virginia do not. So that's something to keep in mind. But as you know, maybe you're expanding, you'll want to make sure that you're having the right tax IDs in place for your business. It's also often referred to as your withholding ID as well. I'm going to have to try, I think, and connect my to my phone, my 5. But sorry, Anne, continue your question.
Yeah, so when you were talking about the state ID, what I usually do for the legalization is that I help the students get their article of organization, their trade name, and then in the process, I get them their sales and use tax, which gives them their state tax ID number. So that CRA number, is that what you're referring to?
So for some states, that would probably be the same ID. I do know that in Maryland, your sales and use tax ID is different from your state income tax ID.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's a lot of kind of looking specifically at states. But I will say that we run into this a lot where businesses don't have these tax IDs and the application process isn't too grueling. But I like for businesses to know kind of what's entailed with payroll in that process.
Okay, great. Okay.
But the state tax ID and also the SUI tax ID are very similar, I'm sure, application-wise to the tax, sales and use tax.
Okay, all right, great. So if you want to reshare your presentation.
All right.
Yep, and we'll continue. Thanks.
Hopping back into it here. Of course. And SUI is a tax ID based on where your business is located. So if your business is registered with the IRS in Maryland, then you would have a Maryland SUI tax ID. Businesses are required to pay state unemployment tax on behalf of their employees. And that's one of the taxes that employers are required to pay and are associated with. And this is also just referred to, of course, as the unemployment ID. So you'll hear withholding quite often, and unemployment with SUI it's a little bit more obvious than withholding being state income tax.
So Sarah, just for clarification on the unemployment tax, isn't there a percentage of their salary that they have to pay when they do payroll? Can you elaborate a little on that?
Of course, yeah. So unemployment is a percentage amount that is based on how much an employee is getting paid at that time. So if their salary, it's going to be, their pay period check date or their pay period check amount, it'll be a percentage of that. And then hourly would be the same. So it is based on salary, but you're only held liable for, I want to say like up to, I don't want to get this number wrong, but it's only a couple $1,000s really that you'll be paying towards unemployment.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of the students here are very new, so I'm just asking, questions to clarify some points for them.
Yeah, definitely. And please do. This is geared towards, kind of businesses that I'm consistently meeting with. And those are typically ones who are ready to look into payroll. So if you guys don't feel like I'm explaining something so that you understand, please do let me know. Because the goal is to really just help you guys understand payroll and what's entailed in it. But payroll taxes, they kind of suck. I'm going to be honest. Sometimes I know DC specifically has a 2-week turnaround from the time you submit your application to when you actually get your IDs. So this is typically something we suggest that businesses get in place a couple weeks, if not a month, before they actually have a check date. And also, any good compliant payroll system is going to make sure that you have these tax IDs, because this is how they file taxes to the government on behalf of your business. So if you sign up for a payroll processor that doesn't ask for these, that should be a very big red flag. Next, we have W-2 versus 1099. I didn't want to get too into the weeds with this because there's a lot of exceptions.
Okay. Anybody have any initial questions while we wait for Sarah to come back? Anything that kind of pinged in your head that you're curious about?
I was going to ask, how many employees do you need to have in order to have a payroll processor?
One.
Oh,
'Cause
really?
yeah, because right before COVID, I was going to W-2 my 2 interns. And that's how I got in touch with ADP the first time 2 years ago. And they kind of explained to me the process, and it really was not that expensive, because really what you're doing is paying their salary plus whatever extra fee that you would pay, that percentage for unemployment and workman's compensation, and it wasn't really that much more. And then
No, I was listening.
yeah, it really wasn't that much more difference in the pay. And so by the time it all said and done, I would say it was maybe another 20% more that I was paying per intern, that I was going to be doing, because I was already paying them, before, and it would have been an extra 30% or something like that. It wasn't that much more.
Okay.
Yeah, she's bad.
And it's probably easier to have a processor, that way you just type in the numbers and it all transpires for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, she's back.
I'm back again. I changed Wi-Fi's. Fingers crossed this one stays with us. But hopefully you guys are having some fun, good conversations while I get myself back together here.
Yeah.
We'll hop back into it.
Yeah, so one of the students was asking a question about how many people do you need to have on your payroll to have a servicer? And so my answer was 1. You may want to weigh in on that a little bit.
Definitely. And we'll kind of touch base on this towards the end of the presentation too. But having just one employee on payroll, even if it's yourself, having a payroll service like ADP is super beneficial, because primarily the tax liability, if there's any errors with your taxes, because ADP is responsible for A, calculating, and also B, distributing that tax money. If you do get an audit by the IRS, ADP covers that audit and pays for that audit. So what that means is, if you're paying one or two employees, and you get audited and you're doing it in-house, you're responsible for, it could be a $5,000 audit, it could be a $25,000. And I'm sure that, affecting your bottom line like that is really not great. So there is a cost, obviously, with payroll processor, but I kind of tell my clients it's better safe than to be sorry.
Right.
Yeah. But we see that a lot. And actually, I meet with a lot of businesses who are just starting out. And if you're planning on rapid growth or even hiring 1 to 2 to 3 employees in the next 6 to 10 months, having your payroll already set up and in place means that you can focus on getting that employee trained. You don't have to worry about compliance forms, any other information like that your payroll provider is going to take care of for you. So it kind of makes your life easier in that side of things, but also with the tax liability, it's a huge benefit.
And you all also do benefits as well.
Sorry, repeat that?
I remember you saying something about benefits when you first logged on.
Yeah, we also handle benefits, so we can help businesses either shop out health insurance or retirement plans. But the main thing we do with benefits is integrate it into your payroll. So, for example, when you have an employee who's got, a 401k deduction, for example, if you process that payroll and then you have to write down exactly how much he's putting into his 401k and then go over to your 401k site and log in and put in that info, it leads to a lot of user errors. So we make that integration so it's seamless with your payroll. And that's another thing where we take the liability. If something's wrong, it's on us, type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Of course. But to get back to it, W-2 versus 1099, I didn't want to get really in the weeds with this because it is very kind of case by case. But on the next slide here, we'll talk about some of the classifications and things to think about when classifying your employees. But the basic breakdown here is W-2 employees do have taxes taken out of their paychecks. So they have state, federal, and sometimes local taxes taken out. They're also eligible for benefits, like we talked about, health, retirement, and also paid time off, which 1099s are not eligible for. 1099s alternatively are not taxed, so they file their personal taxes at the end of the year, and that's when their taxes are paid. That requires business owners to keep track of their records, of their payments, everything like that, to send out those forms. And sometimes I'll see business owners who pay contractors through like Venmo, for example. And it's not great because if they did it through Venmo sometimes and then checks some other times, it creates multiple platforms that they have to comb through.
I have a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is it more beneficial to be a 1099 or to do 1099 or do W-2, or it don't matter?
Well, it depends. And sometimes business owners will think that having 1099s means they're not responsible for those employer taxes, which is true. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you can classify all of your employees as a 1099. There is a lot of cases where it could go either way, really, but the Department of Labor does what they call tests to check and audit small businesses to make sure they're classifying, their employees correctly, because we do see a lot of people who pay all of their employees as 1099s to avoid those taxes, and legally, that's not right. And so they'll get really heavy fines from the Department of Labor, and they even have to pay back taxes on every payment made to a misclassified worker. So I don't really want to say one is better than the other. It's just like, what category do they fit in better, if that makes sense.
Yes, I get it. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. All right. So just briefly wanted to mention, I know I have said this probably like 5 times now, but the Department of Labor does test to make sure that you're classifying your employees correctly. And this was a really cool infographic I found. I didn't make this, unfortunately. I wish I could call credit for that, but this was on the Department of Labor website. And I think it's really just helpful to look at and kind of use this as a small, test to see if you're correctly classifying employees, especially when you start hiring. So employees are typically paid salary or hourly. They use employer materials. So I do see a lot of IT companies that have employees that they pay as 1099s, but they do provide, computers, tech stuff, mouses, keyboards, stuff like that. And so that's kind of a gray area. It depends on their work functions and how the employee does their work to determine where that employee would be classified. If anyone has specific questions about, examples of how an employee would be classified, I'd love to talk more in depth about that. But I don't want to get in the weeds of it because, like I said, there's a lot of gray area and kind of unsureness around it. But it's a really great, just, quick glance tool to use to determine how to classify someone. I also just wanted to include, because I know that Austin Tech is based in Maryland, I'm assuming most of the business owners on are going to be based in Maryland. So I wanted to include some information that's Maryland specific and also, hot right now based on legislative updates and compliance. So the first is sit and SUI taxes are required for Maryland, also DC and Virginia. You do have to have a workers' comp policy in Maryland if you have any employees that are not the business owner. So above 1 employee, and you need to have a workers' comp policy in place to protect your business. It's the same for DC. However, Virginia does require 3 or more employees. Maryland requires a paid time off system in place for your business. And you have one of 2 choices with it. It's something you can kind of look into for your business yourself and see which fits you guys better. But just like to let people know about that came with COVID and a lot of people taking sick time off. And the last thing here, which is hot off the press, this is relatively new, is the Maryland Saves program, which is a program that came out in 2022, where the Maryland government is requiring small business owners to put in place a retirement plan for their employees. So there's a lot of knockouts and exceptions with this bill, and we still don't have a lot of the requirements or eligibility for it. So I don't want to touch too much on it, but I like to let people know it's out there and it's coming. They've said 2022 is the year they're putting it in place. So definitely keep that in mind. If you have questions about that, please reach out. I've got some more resources on that as well. And also thought this might be helpful for you guys, especially because I don't know what stage of the business cycle you might be in right now. But keep this in mind for your future. And like I said, I'll send this out so you guys can use this later. What you want to look for in your payroll provider. You definitely want tax liability coverage. That's going to protect your business. It's going to save you from, hurting your bottom line, and it's going to make your life a lot better. You want a quick and efficient service desk, help desk, or a contact that you can go to for payroll questions. If you have a payroll that's coming out tomorrow and you're sitting down tonight to run your payroll, but you have a question about Susie Q, you don't want to have to wait 3 to 5 business days to get answers for a pressing matter like that. You don't want to worry or find out next week that, oh, you paid Susie Q wrong, and you could be in trouble with the IRS. So that's one of the top things to look out for. Definitely up-to-date compliance. We are in the capital region. We have so many different changes. I know with COVID, things went crazy in the small business world, trying to stay up with all of the changes that were made. But it's definitely something you need to be aware of, because there are huge ramifications for not having a good compliance system in place. Workers' comp, I know we didn't really talk about it today, but it's definitely something you want to look into, because with traditional workers' comp, you'll pay an estimated amount. You'll estimate how much payroll you might run in 1 year, and you might say $100,000, for example. And then it might, turn out that you did $200,000 worth of payroll in the year. So then you would be held responsible for paying more money at the end of the year. So there's very large sums of money being moved around with a traditional style workers' comp. So you want to find one that integrates to your payroll so that you can pay chunks of your workers' comp throughout the year that's based on current payroll data, if that makes sense. That was a very quick, short version of workers' comp, but if you have questions about it, please do let me know.
Yeah.
Human resources.
Yeah, I'm glad I meant to jump in real quick. So I'm glad you shared this slide, because I don't think a lot of us, and including myself, there's some items on here that I didn't think that you would need to have in place before you really get into payroll. Specifically, when they talk about the employee onboard and access, even though most of the time you think that just interviewing someone is part of the onboarding, but then when I really think about what employees go through to bring one employee on, it's more than just the interview or introducing people to your team. It's a whole process.
It is.
And talking about benefits, you think that's so scary, but I do know that I think it's employees that have under a certain amount of employees have a discount, or they have some sort of less tax liability when they have less than 50 employees or something like that. So there's, you guys really should be taking a screenshot of this, because if and when you do decide, that you want to have help or hire someone, these are definitely things you're going to want to have on your checklist for sure.
Definitely. And the employee access, it's huge, and you don't realize how much goes into it. I have employee access with my payroll provider. So not only was my onboarding super fast and easy, I did it all digitally. So if you guys have remote workers, it's really easy to get them set up in your payroll. But it also takes a lot of liability off of your shoulders. You're not carrying around forms with their social or their address, and you're also not, entering their information. God forbid you enter it wrong and a check gets delivered to the wrong place. It's small things like that that make a big difference for small business owners. And the access part is huge, because if I'm an employee and I want to apply for a car loan, for example, I'm going to have to track down my manager or the owner of the business and say, I need you to print me off a current W-2. So you're going to have to compute all your numbers. You're going to have to build out a W-2 for this employee. It could take 20 minutes. It could take an hour. I'm not 100% sure, but it'll take time out of your day. Whereas most payroll services offer nowadays employee access so they can download their W-2 and it's up to date with their most recent payroll. So they have that proof of income. But it's a really, big thing. And we're in the world of technology now, where I would never suggest to a small business owner not to look for things that are going to make their life easier and will help their employees with happiness and retention. So huge one right there. Recruitment assistance as well. ADP partners with ZipRecruiter. So I don't want to touch on, I don't know much about other payroll providers, how they do that, but ADP helps our small businesses to hire and find qualified candidates. And we also actively will reach out to people we think would be good fits. So it's a really cool tool when you can't pay a recruiting firm, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to hire a new employee. And then benefit integration, we touched on this a little bit with the 401k, but just makes your life easier and makes payroll a click of a button instead of 80,000 tabs and 50 different logins, that type of thing. Because if you're anything like me, you forget your password every day. Makes your life a lot easier. And with this, I just want to say ADP does all of this and more, which we'll look at in this slide. These are just some examples of things that we offer to our small businesses, so you can kind of get an idea of what to expect and demand from your payroll provider. A lot of this right here is the HR portion, because we talked all about the taxes in the beginning half of this presentation, but you definitely want to look for a full service payroll provider that's going to give you not only support and protection in terms of taxes and money, but also in terms of your people, because I'm sure that you guys are investing and you see your employees as investments to build your business. This is a great way to take care of them and make sure that they're happy and efficient. And looking at this, if anybody has questions about any of these, feel free to let me know. I won't take up too much time with ADP, but did just want to mention this here. And then also here, this is just a screenshot of what our platform looks like. Every payroll provider is different, but ours is we build out an actual website for your business. And it makes your life a little bit easier. It houses all of your employee data, all of your records, any of your reports that your CPA might need, you can find them here. And then also the integration, you can find all of that stuff here as well. So just wanted to end this off with some useful links. And like I said, this will be sent to Anne so she can share it with you if you have questions or want to check these out. But Maryland wage, tax and wage facts, I find that helpful as a resource. You know, even being at this job for multiple years, I still look at this just to kind of make sure that I'm up to date on everything going on. The Maryland Department of Labor, of course, you could do the Virginia or DC Department of Labor, but find this one really helpful. It's where I found that great W-2 versus 1099 infographic. And they have really up-to-date information, of course, as well. The Maryland Comptroller's Office, this will take you kind of through unemployment. So if you have unemployment tax ID questions, you can check out the Comptroller's Office. I put ADP Spark on here. It's a blog that ADP runs for our small business clients that kind of touch base on legislative things, compliance updates, industry stuff, anything small business you might ever want to learn is on Spark. So it's like a weekly email type of thing. So I check that out pretty frequently. ADP also on our website, and you can just Google ADP resources. We do have a lot of free information for you guys. It's super helpful, but I would definitely check out, especially when you're starting to get your payroll set up. If you have employees, you know, across multiple states, I would check out this payroll forms page. This gives you an in-depth look at every individual state and what's required for payroll for those states. So it's really, really great tool. And it even, I believe, lets you download the forms needed for payroll as well, based on the state. So that's really great. And shameless plug here, I also put my LinkedIn here because I do post regular updates on my LinkedIn. I like to highlight my clients, but I also like to talk about things that are going on in our region, things that I'm speaking to my clients about, and all other fun things. So that's really all I had for you. Are there any questions, comments? How does everyone feel? Do we feel like we know a lot about payroll now?
Are you able to share a general idea of how much it would cost to use ADP for, say, an individual
sole proprietor with no employees?
Yeah. So I don't typically give pricing, and there's a reason for that. It's because, like, when I sit down with a business, we go through and we kind of feel out. I have a bunch of questions that I ask to understand their needs and their wants. So our packages can range anywhere from like $800 a month or $800 a year, goodness, to like $5,000 a year, depending on how much HR you might need. For one employee S Corp, which is the owner on the payroll, you're looking definitely at that cheaper end. But with that being said, I would definitely want to determine your needs and wants and goals before I give you firm pricing.
And this service would be considered a business expense, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
I could be wrong on that. I have heard people talk about that.
Yeah, I can actually speak
it
from a
is,
tax
okay.
perspective. Yeah, I can speak from a tax perspective. It is a benefit because that's counted as a loss because you're actually paying out salaries to an individual. So some of that stuff you can actually put in your taxes that you're paying a specific salary, just like you would pay for your lease or pay for any subscription, that you can actually use that as part of your losses. And then that will be subtracted from your gross sales. And then anything that's different. So, once you start making a profit, you will be paying self-employment tax. But if you have a loss, then of course you're going to get a refund. And just so you guys know that employing yourself as one employee also opens you up to other benefits, business benefits, which is business insurance products, as is one of them, so that you can have that. It also opens you up to other, like even now, grant opportunities for businesses that have at least one employee or maybe two employees or more. I think they're focusing more on the bigger businesses, but at least bring you closer to, other funding opportunities too that I'm seeing out there. And there's also some products in one of the insurance products I'm going to share with you guys tonight that will also help you in that effort as well, just by being a W-2 employee.
Yeah, and off of that, Anne, I just want to say, during COVID, I had a lot of business owners that were just one employee that didn't need payroll before, but came to me and said, I need, a payroll for the reports and proof, of payment so that they could apply for the PPP loan, because that was a requirement. They had to have, those records, those proof of frequent pays for an employee. So hopefully, COVID will never happen again and we won't have to worry about that. But it adds a little bit of, security on that front if that's something that's ever required for your business.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so who has questions? Who, anything that, Sara talked about, anything I pointed out that might be sticking and flowing around in your brain that you might be curious about in terms of payroll? You may not always be there yet, but you might be having some thoughts on it.
Yeah, I was hoping that today was a good, what to look for or expect in the future when you're getting payroll. But if there is anybody who, is at that point now, please do reach out. Would love to kind of talk more in depth about specifics with you.
Yeah, I'll make sure I have your contact and your email in there in
Definitely.
the classroom so they can reach out to you. Most of the folks here in this room are very new businesses who are really getting their foundation together. But I think what you gave them today was really something to think about when it comes to their employees. They probably don't have the answer. They're still working on their business plans and still trying to flesh out their actual strategy concept for launch. I think they'll probably get more into employees once they start launching their business, but at least they know what to expect. And that's the goal for the day, is to really educate them that if and when you do decide to have an employee, whether it be W-2 or 1099, at least they know these are things you have to have in place before you even think about hiring anyone. And just keep your business. Yeah, absolutely. This was great. And thank you so much for sticking in there, Sarah. Don't have any other questions, let's thank Sarah. Let's give her a hand for coming out and being a trooper to give us this great information. I thought it was great because I learned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.